Hey y'all, my name is Brooke Richmond and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. Today I will be doing a full recap of Ginny and Georgia's season 3, episodes 5, 6, and 7. Okay, y'all. So, did these episodes stress you out? Because they definitely had me stressed out. Okay, I had to do my own self care after these episodes. So, let's talk about it and let's process together. Okay, so um, the beginning of episode 5, opens with everybody going crazy. The PI just dropped all this information about Georgia and her past, right? And so we see that she's starting to have these flashbacks. And I love that the show did this. And let me tell you why. So we see she's having these flashbacks, and these flashbacks are going back to when she's had to unalive her ex husbands. And just there was even a flashback about her running, or we see her running away from her stepdad, right? And so I felt like these flashbacks just provided perspective because I can see with George's character, like maybe people going in and out, even myself, going in and out of having compassion for her and extending grace to her because she is so manipulative and she is extremely selfish and just thinks about herself. And, we see how all of her choices and decisions are impacting her children. We see that she will, by any means necessary, take somebody out. Okay. And it can be hard to just see that she's had to develop this mindset about herself to get her needs met. And I feel like those flashbacks help us see that she's had so many situations where her needs were not met, where basically she was being sent the message that she didn't matter. And so I love that these flashbacks were kind of popping in and out during that scene of them being in the courtroom, because again, I feel like it provided perspective. We see that Georgia has just really had to do what she's had to do to survive. And then we also see that bringing up all this information with her ex-husband, even when they mention like her actual name, being Mary, she's getting triggered. She's having like a strong reaction to this information. And so that also lets us know that Georgia has been burying and pushing down these traumatic experiences. Like, we see that even having to unalive these men was something that really affected her. And then being called Mary was is her actual name, which takes her back to being abused by her stepdad. So all of these, all of these memories are just flooding her, right? Excuse me. All of these memories are just flooding her, and that can just be really, really hard to reflect on. And I feel like hopefully, the audience, and I know just even for me, I was able to look at Georgia's life and just see that, wow, she's just had to survive. And it's just so unfortunate that this is where she's landed. Um, so that was just kind of something that stood out to me. Let me see. I'm just going to be throwing my thoughts out there, y'all. Okay. We processing together. Remember, excuse me. Um, Jenny, let's talk about Jenny for a second. So Jenny is constantly being parentified, where she's taking on the responsibilities of the adult, like as she is an adult, or as if she is the mom. So, right, like, so we see her taking on just very adult like responsibilities, and that's the expectation of her, right? And so it just made me think about, like, what are, the safe spaces for Jenny? And it doesn't even seem like she has very many safe spaces to deal with her own stuff and to, be able to process the things that she has going on, to process how everything has impacted her. And I thought it was I thought it was so interesting, and it just really stood out for me when she said, and I made sure I got the direct quote, "I wanted anyone, other adults, to see what I saw in my mom so the weight of it wasn't just on me." Wow. That's powerful. And I think that's something to just keep in mind just as you reflect on your own relationships. Like, what do the boundaries look like? Are we parentifying, the children in our lives? Are we expecting them to take on certain responsibilities that really the adults are supposed to be taking on? So, that definitely stood out for me. And it's just so important that we allow kids to just focus on what they're supposed to be focusing on: school, hanging out with friends, being on social media, things like that, right? And we see how Jenny being parentified has really impacted her, and we see how it's impacted her relationship with her mom. There's just no safety, no emotional safety. There's very little trust, and we see that Jenny um, just has to continue to just take these things on, and it's just so heavy. And I even mentioned here, like, Jenny has had to carry so much for so long, and then she was conditioned to lie and protect Georgia. That is heavy. Okay. And as we just kind of take that in, like, she just has had to do so much to help Georgia, and, like I mentioned, protect Georgia. And even in this current situation, that's what she's doing. As they are going, as Georgia is on trial, everybody knows the truth. Jenny knows the truth, but yet and still, she is protecting her mom and she's lying for her mom. And because she was conditioned to do this, it's just all she knows. Like, it's I don't think she knows that she can do anything different. I think she has moments where she really tries, but it's really hard for her to do. And we even see that when there was a scene where um Zion was expecting her or Zion was asking her, like, "Hey, like, I need to know what's going on. What is all this information that's coming out about your mom?" And you can see Jenny just becoming very flustered. She looks like she's, getting anxious and nervous because she eventually has to tell her dad the truth. She has to be honest about what's going on. But for so long, she's been lying and protecting Georgia because, again, that's what she was conditioned to do. And by her being conditioned, we see that during the flashback moments that, let me see, I'm trying to think of an example. When Georgia and Jenny went shopping, right? Shopping. And Georgia didn't want Jenny to share, that they had went shopping with Zion because they went shopping. But also she had took her out of school and all of the things. And so when Zion comes back home, this is when, Jenny is smaller, of course. Zion comes home and, he's greeting them and things like that. He asks her how school is, and she lies. She looks at her mom looks at her, and she lies about being at school when she was really out shopping. And so we see a lot of moments like that throughout the entire series. But that flashback was so specific. And then we see her going into having to have a conversation with Zion, and Zion wanting the truth. And so it's just not easy for Jenny to, be open and honest. It's not easy for Jenny to feel like she can be open and honest about her mom and what her mom has done, because this is how she's been raised, right? um let's see here. Let me see, what else do I have here. I see, again, I wrote here, Jeannie knows the truth and she's constantly having to protect Georgia, which is stressful. That is very stressful. We see here, let me see, it is hard, um so because she's had to take on different things for Georgia, it's hard for Jenny. I made a note here, it's hard for Jenny to allow anyone to be there for her because she's been dealing with her own thoughts and her feelings and experiences alone. basically. And so when it comes time for people to be there for her, like Zion is trying to be there for her friends are trying to be there for her. It's hard. And it's not, it doesn't feel that safe to allow other people to be there for her because she's constantly having to deal with things by herself. She's constantly being parentified where she's taking care of everyone else and carrying everything for everyone else. And no one is really being there for her. Um, Let me see. I even made a note about, seeing Ginny's trauma responses, shifting a little bit. So we know that the trauma responses are fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? And I had talked about the trauma responses in a previous video where I felt like some of Ginny's behaviors were a reflection of her trauma response being fawn, where she kind of just gives in. And this is mainly what I see when it comes to her relationship with Georgia. But now, um, I feel like I'm seeing some of the fight come out. I feel like I'm seeing some of the flight come out, and the fight comes out when her friend Press, you know. Addresses her and it makes just an inappropriate joke about her mom and what's going on with the trial and the ex-husbands and things like that. And Jenny proceeds to, punch him in his face. She punches him in his nose, I believe. And I feel like in that moment, it was just so impulsive. That's all she knew how to. That was the only response she knew, to someone saying something like that. That was very triggering for her, and it was extremely inappropriate and insensitive of Press to say something like that to her. But that was the only way she knew how to respond, was to be aggressive in that moment, and that's how she handled her feelings about that. Then I mentioned like her flight response. We see that Mang, her friend group, is, they're trying to be there for her, they're trying to support her, but she tells them she doesn't want to talk. And rightfully so. It can be a lot to talk about. But we also know, like with flight, you can be emotionally trying to avoid something, emotionally trying to flee from a situation. And with her not wanting to talk about it and constantly being away from this group, throughout this particular season of what's going on in the episode and in the story, boom, we see that she's emotionally trying to flee. We see that she doesn't want to deal with what's going on. And so that can, I think that's just something to, it's important to highlight because we see that the trauma responses, they can change according to whatever the need is at the time, whatever just might be the response internally that, that's just going on. Let me see here. Some pivotal moments during episode 5 specifically. So let's talk about what really had your girl stressed out. So we see that Jenny's poem goes viral. Okay, this is not good. It's not good because in the poem, it's basically being perceived that she is admitting that her mom is a monster, that her mom is this person that goes and unalives people. And really Jenny was just using her poetry to express herself, to cope with her feelings. She was encouraged to use her poetry as a tool, in therapy. And so now this poem has gone viral and it's everywhere. All the students have been watching it. So she runs home, right? She doesn't want to deal with it. She doesn't want to deal with all this attention. And she runs home. She goes in her room and she's planning to self-harm. She's planning to burn herself. And we know that Jenny struggles with this, which she's been working so hard on replacing her unhealthy coping skills with healthy coping skills. But in this very moment, she's extremely triggered, she's extremely stressed. And so she wants to self harm in the way that she's used to self harming. And Georgia, as Jenny is walking or running into the house, Georgia is also seeing that this poem went viral. So everyone is just having a very strong reaction to this, and she sees that Jenny is running upstairs. Georgia knows what's about to happen, and so Georgia goes after her. And I do have to give my props to Georgia in this moment. She had such a strong, beautiful mom moment during this scene, because we see that Jenny is really struggling. She's extremely emotional. She's about to burn. And Georgia is so supportive in trying to distract Jenny, right? So she's trying to help Jenny to say the poem to distract her from burning, from self harming. And something that Jenny says that confirms everything that I'm saying about her being parentified and just carrying things for other people, including her family, her mom, is she says, I failed us. This 16-year-old girl is saying that I failed us. That is heavy. That means she's really been carrying so much. And Georgia does a great job in reassuring her and letting her know, like, no, I failed us. I was the one who did that. And again, this was just such a beautiful mom moment for Georgia. And so we see that eventually Georgia gets Jenny to open the door. Jenny does not burn. George is able to remove the lighter from Jenny, which is great. And she just holds her and she just lets her know, like, this is not on you, basically. This and it doesn't have to be on you. This is me. This is what I did. I did all of this. And Jenny is just she's just falling apart, right? Then, we don't even get to like really take all that in, because we're like, no, Jenny, don't burn, don't self-harm. And right after all of that happens, then we hear the doorbell ring, and it's DCFS. Stressful. Stressful, y'all. DCFS, the Department of Children and Family Services, has just arrived to the home to remove Jenny and Austin from Georgia. And that scene was hard to watch. So I used to work with children in foster care. And so watching that scene, one, the show got it right. It was extremely accurate, but it just also reminded me specifically of the heaviness of that, the heaviness of being taken away from your primary attachment figure. Like she's their mom and she's been taking care of them. And now they're being abruptly removed from her. And that again is stressful. That is traumatic. That's traumatizing. And we see that, everything has just everything is crazy now. George is very emotional, the kids are very emotional, and we see now who is involved in DCFS coming to the house. We see that Gil was a part of, this happening. And then we also see that Zion, Jenny's dad, is a part of making this happen. And that is so disappointing. It's extremely disappointing because we know that Zion really knows Georgia. And to some, capacity, they do have a friendship. She considers Zion to be family. And, you know, it's I think it's even frustrating too, if I'm putting myself in George's shoes, like to know that this person really knows you and they know your story and your history, and they still went and did this and basically adding to this narrative that Georgia is a monster. That was extremely disappointing. And so episode 5 just closes with so much drama and trauma, drama and trauma, and it's just so heavy. Um, let me see here. Okay, woo, just too much, too much. Um, okay, episode 6. Whew, we see that episode 6 opens with, now mind you, we just ended episode 5 with all the drama and trauma, right? Then episode 6 opens with this sweet memory. I perceived this scene to be just a sweet memory of Georgia reflecting on her time as a mom with her kids, and they're running through the house playing hide and seek, and that's just such a sweet memory, a sweet family moment that I feel like she was reflecting on, because now her kids are not in the house. Now it's just her, and she's having to just sit with herself and sit with everything. Um, and, I feel like that scene helped me to, really see and acknowledge that, Georgia has been the one raising these kids. She's been the one taking care of them despite everything that has happened, and, what the kids have had to go through as Georgia was making different decisions in order to survive. She's still the one that's been taking care of them. She is their mom. And I think even Ginny says that at the end of episode 5, like, everyone is seeing my mom as this monster, but at the end of the day, she's my mom and I love her. And when we see that scene, and it's so sweet and beautiful, I feel like that is what, seals it. Like these kids still have these beautiful moments with her, and she's been fostering them. She's been cultivating, this relationship with them. She's been keeping their family together for all of these years. Has she been going about it in ways that are healthy and right? No, but she's been the one doing it, period. um so that was just something that was, I felt like important to highlight. Like, she is their attachment figure. She, again, she's still their mom. um Let me see here. um we see in episode 6, now we're starting to have more conversations about, you know who Georgia is, and you know what her life has, basically, what it's looked like what it could be labeled as. And I love that the show is highlighting these different labels and diagnoses, like narcissistic personality disorder, complex post traumatic stress disorder, complex PTSD. I love that the show is highlighting that, because it is important to have that information and education. But what I also appreciate about the show is that it's helping the audience to see how these behaviors develop. Like, people don't just act this way and become this way because the sky is blue. Okay, no, they have different experiences that create their worldview, basically, that create their whole entire mindset, and how they approach the world, how they approach relationships. And it's important for us to know that, so that when we're navigating our own relationships, we can have just a better understanding. We can be more compassionate. We can, again, extend more grace, kind of like what I mentioned earlier. And as you're navigating these relationships, with this information coming out and being explored on the show, these different topics being explored on this show, we see how they are developed. We see how these behaviors are developed, but we also see how they can be problematic in different relationships. And so, it kind of gives us the information to know, like, okay, how do we now, you know, navigate when the behaviors become problematic. And, I feel like we kind of see that a little bit with Paul. Like, he knows everything about Georgia. She, had opened up to him about a lot of things before they got married. And now, the honesty piece is becoming an issue, because not everything was shared, which is part of the narcissistic personality disorder, because there's still a level of guardedness that we see with people who have that disorder, that personality disorder. But, now he's like, okay, I have to establish a boundary. I don't know how long I can deal with the lack of honesty. And we know that in a marriage, there has to be trust, right? And so I think Paul is, feeling conflicted as all this information is coming out. And yes, we're considering all of the things and George's entire story. But then, how much is too much? And everyone has a limit. Okay. So just wanted to, share that yes, this information is helpful. Yes, we can have a better understanding of how these behaviors are developed. Yes, we can be understanding. Yes, we can be compassionate, but we can still have boundaries in relationships with these people. Okay, y'all, I had to get some tea because I felt like there was just a frog in my throat that just wouldn't go away. Okay, I got my tea. I'm ready to proceed. Okay, so let's go back to Georgia for a second. Okay. So Georgia has some really powerful moments where we see that she is, starting to do a lot of self reflection. She's starting to um, show that there is a level of self awareness. Okay. And we see this when she talks about her own struggle with depression, which is important. It's important for her to understand that. And this comes out when Marcus comes over to help fix her window that was broken because someone threw a brick through her window. And we know Marcus struggles with depression. And so she brings this up with him and she says something that's so powerful to him. She said, I feel like it's been waiting on me. And that really stood out to me. My therapist alarms, they start going off because it just made me think about how we can like really go through life just suppressing things and pushing it down, not dealing with our stuff, and it still will be right there waiting for us to deal with it. It doesn't go away just because you push it down. It doesn't go away. And I love the this analogy that I've used with clients of looking at their experiences and the feelings that they are avoiding as like their emotional trash can. So like we know with just your regular trash in your home, if you don't take out the trash, it becomes a problem. You start to get flies or, ants, bugs, things like that. It might start to stink. Now the whole house has an odor. You might even try to push it down, get your foot, and push it down to make space. But eventually things continue to pile on top of each other. It continues to be a problem. You have to take the trash out, put a new trash bag in the trash can, and clear it out. We got to clear those things out. And it's the same principle. It's the same thing when we think about our own emotions and our own life experiences. If we're not dealing with those things and we just keep pushing it down, we keep suppressing, we keep avoiding, it becomes a problem. It becomes an even bigger problem. Now, I will say with Georgia, she ain't had time to deal and feel with everything that she's had going on. She's been in survival mode for a really long time. But with everything that's going on currently, with the kids being removed from her care and or from her home, and the trial and her marriage being on thin ice, she's really having to sit with herself and again do a lot of self-reflection and really look at herself in the mirror. And we're seeing the outcome of that. And we're seeing that she's realizing that, I've been dealing with this for a long time. And she even said something about like I haven't felt like this since I was a kid, which means that she knew that she had these struggles, but again, she was suppressing them and burying them because she didn't. In George's case, she didn't have time to be dealing and feeling, like I said. But it is important that she's talking about it now and she's acknowledging it now, and um, she's allowing the trash bag to be cleared out, which is great. That's really, really good. So I want to give Georgia her props on that. Um, we also see, let me see, episode 6. Another just a big boom in episode 6, of course, is Ginny finding out she's pregnant. And it's just like, what more does this girl need to be dealing with? And, I'll be honest, you guys, I was like, dang, like the cycle is going to repeat itself. Like, we know about that generational trauma, just things just, continuing, from one generation to the next. And And I was just like, this is just so stressful. And we see how Jenny is dealing with everything. She's hanging out with this new guy. She wants to have fun, but she's just trying to distract herself. She's in her flight mode. She doesn't want to deal with everything. She's trying to cope in other ways. And now she's pregnant. And we just see just the impact that all of these events are having on her. We see, she wasn't just taken from Georgia and being in Georgia's home, but she was also separated from her brother, somebody who she truly, truly loves and she's close to, and she, has been responsible for ultimately. And so now adding on the fact that she's pregnant, adding that onto her plate, it's just like, what more? What else does she need to be dealing with? So my heart just went out to Jenny, in that moment, and I just felt so stressed out for her. And I was just like, no, Jenny, you don't need anything else, sweetie, to be dealing with. So Jenny, boo, we gonna keep you close to us, honey. So moving on into episode 7. So we find out episode 6, Jenny is pregnant. Moving on to episode 7, she finds a way to make sure she can tell Georgia she's pregnant, because remember the supervised visits and all of that. She wanted to share with her, but she couldn't. And she can't talk to her mom when she wants to talk to her mom because it has to be monitored. And shout out to Max for working things out so that Jenny could talk to Georgia. Her and Sophie, they created like some kind of distraction with the reporters being in front of the house. And so shout out to Max, because without that, Jenny wouldn't have been able to sneak into the house to talk to her mom, and she really needed to talk to her. So what happens when Jenny tells Georgia she's pregnant? Whew, this scene was intense. We see that Georgia struggled initially. She struggled initially with that information. And, I think that she was going through a series of emotions. Like she was, dealing with some level of disappointment and shame. And, I think she was preparing to judge Jenny for getting pregnant. And also just we know that Georgia can go into that space where she now makes things about herself. And so I feel like Georgia was like going through that process, and then she reeled it in and she became just so loving, and she was so supportive towards Jenny. And that's what Jenny needed in that moment. She didn't need Georgia to make it about herself. She didn't need to be judged. She didn't need to know that Georgia was disappointed. She just needed her mom to be there for her. And Georgia did that, which was great. And then we also see Georgia, she helped Jenny with making the decision to move forward with terminating the pregnancy, which was also, that was probably really hard. And, I love that Georgia was, she helped Jenny, but she didn't tell her what to do. And Jenny did want her to do that. She wanted more like direction with that. But that is a sticky situation to be in, especially because Georgia has experienced, being a teen mom. She's experienced a teen pregnancy. And I love that she even, said to Jenny, like, you and Austin are the best thing that have ever happened to me. You guys are my life. You guys are my air. But you, Jenny, and she started to highlight all of her strengths and all the beautiful things about Jenny that can help her have a different life. And she kept it real with her too. Like she said, like, she talked about the realities of having a baby, but also having a baby as a teenager. And that can be very hard. And again, that cycle would have, repeated itself where now Jenny is struggling and having, different trials and, things that she's going through and having to be in survival mode to some capacity. Of course, we know Georgia probably would have been more helpful and involved, but being a mom, period, is hard. Being a teen mom is even harder. And Georgia knew that, and she shared that with her. And that was just so needed. Like that whole moment between Jenny and Georgia was so important. It was so needed. And I felt like it was a moment of healing for their relationship where where Ginny knew, like, okay, my mom can, be there for me. She can um allow herself to just be a mom. She can allow things to just be about me, and I won't have to be left with taking care of my own feelings and my own emotions. um Let me see here. I always love how the show will go to a certain memory or flashback when something in the present occurs, and we see when Georgia is helping Jenny work through her thoughts and feelings about being pregnant and what she wants to do to move forward. We see Georgia is on the phone with Zion. We see a flashback of Georgia on the phone with Zion, and they are the kids are complaining about car camping, meaning sleeping in the car, and Georgia's just trying to make the best of it and trying to keep things light. We know George is really good at deflecting, um, but young Jenny, is not having it. She's like, one day, can we please just have our own apartment? And I feel like that flashback just helped us to see, like, this is hard. This is really, really hard. And Georgia in that flashback was so great with just trying to get through it. Now, again, do we love the way she goes about getting through it? Like, she has stole the backpack and gave it to Jenny and things like that, and then the sleeping in the car issue. Do we love those things? No, but what do you do when you are a young mom like that and you don't have a lot of support? And Zion, as involved as he is now, and we are looking at Zion, I appreciate that his character is trying to develop a relationship with the kids and maintain that now. But Georgia still, at the end of the day, was left with fending for herself and having to take care of her family by any means necessary. Um, so moving forward, so Ginny decides to go through with terminating the pregnancy. And just as I was sitting there watching her go through all of that, I'm like, wow, again, just having to experience so many emotions. And I wrote down that, Jenny is definitely scared. She's feeling unsure. She's alone. She's in shock. She's sad. She's feeling shame and guilt, but she's also feeling relieved. And I just wanted to highlight that to help everyone understand that, like, we can have a multitude of emotions and feelings when we're having very strong experiences. That's a very strong experience. That's a big thing to go through with terminating a pregnancy. And you know emotions are not it's not like a linear process to experience your emotions. They can be up and down. And you can have, again, a variety of emotions happening all at the same time. And we see that happening with Jenny during that scene. Um i, I want to give a shout out to Zion. Georgia was great in how she was supporting Jenny, but Zion was also great in how he was supporting Jenny. He was very supportive. He was very encouraging. He was not judging her as well. And, we see the importance of, what happens when parents come together and work together and are a team when they are raising children. And Zion and Georgia, during that entire episode, they were great. They were great with helping helping Jenny get through that entire experience. They loved on her. Again, they were supporting her, and they just poured into her, and they made sure she felt safe. And we see that Jenny doesn't have a lot of safe spaces. Like, even now, her poetry is not a safe space. And her friend group, I think, the two people that she feels the safest with is Bracia and Abby. Like, her entire friend group, she doesn't even feel that safe with. She's not completely safe in her relationship with Georgia. She's not completely safe in her relationship with Zion. There's a lot of, resentment there. There's, been a lot of things that have happened that have impacted the trust in both of those relationships. But when this happened, with her, getting pregnant and having to terminate the pregnancy, we see that in that moment, she is provided with a safe space between Georgia and Zion. And that is so important. And Jenny really needed that. Let me see here. Let me go back for a second because I do think this is important for me to highlight and discuss. Georgia had asked Jenny, like, hey, so what happened with the birth control? Like, why aren't you taking your birth control? And I love that Jenny was like, I ain't been thinking about no birth control. Like, with everything that's going on, now you want me to remember to take my birth control? Like, so much has happened. And I love that she was like, I've been so stressed out. Like, I can't even think about that. And it's important to understand what happens literally to our bodies when those stress levels are high, when those cortisol levels are high. It does impact our judgment and does impact, how we think. It can create memory issues and brain fog. You can have issues with concentrating. That's the impact of when those stress levels are high. And I feel like that's what we saw with Jenny, and how she was trying to help Georgia understand, like, I haven't been thinking about taking my birth control, but I kind of forgot, like, just so much has been going on. I'm so stressed out. I'm trying to get through so much with each new day. And it was just the last thing on my mind. So keep that in mind for yourself. Like, when you are noticing your stress levels might be high, take a minute, take a break, slow things down, do some self care, whatever that looks like for you. I know for me, I really like going on long walks and listening to some music, listen to a podcast. Sometimes I walk in silence. I really enjoy that as well. And it just calms me, it slows me down, it gives me peace. Um, and again, it reduces those stress levels. So it's important that we take care of ourselves so that we don't experience that brain fog, that memory loss. I don't want y'all forgetting to take y'all birth control. I mean, I don't make your birth control, your vitamins, whatever you're supposed to be doing. Let's take care of our bodies and our minds, right? Um, Let me see. I think something else that I wanted to point out is the supervised visits and how stressful the supervised visits can be, because you know you can't be yourself. You're being watched by the social worker, making sure that you don't say anything that's too alarming, and that's stressful. That is stressful. I'm telling y'all, drama and trauma and stress was the themes for episodes 5, 6, and 7. That is just a lot. And we see that the kids are trying to get through it. We even see that Georgia is trying to get through those moments with the kids and just trying to make the best of it, trying to, just be positive and, making sure she's really checking in with them. But the whole idea of it is just very, very stressful. And it made me think about, when I used to work with kids in foster care, just how excited they would be about the supervised visit, but also just feeling kind of anxious about it. Sometimes I would even see behaviors increase as it got closer to the supervised visit because of how stressful that was. And like, just the fear of the unknown, like, what is it going to be like to see my mom? What is it going to, or my mom or dad, or, what is it going to, what are we going to talk about? And how, generally the kids know, and the parents know how long it's going to be, but sometimes it can just feel like the time is just being ripped away from you. You just want to spend time with your loved one, and it just be a relaxed environment. And a supervised visit is the opposite of that. It's not a relaxed environment. um Shout out to, let me see, just some thoughts I'm throwing out here. Let me see. Shout out to Marcus. Let's close with Marcus. Shout out to him for showing up for Jenny at the doctor after she terminates the pregnancy. Um, he's also a safe space. I'm going back to safe spaces. He is also a safe space for Jenny in that moment. He was a safe space for Jenny in that moment. She just needed a friend. She just needed someone to be there with her so that she didn't have to sit with everything alone. And thankfully, Georgia was willing to bring him in because she couldn't go with her being on house arrest and things. And he still showed up and he still, was there for her, took her to get some ice cream and just sat with her. And I think that's important to take in, just like, as we're seeing different people go through things, like sometimes just being there can be so helpful and so impactful. You don't have to know what to say, you don't have to do anything. Sometimes just sitting with them and being present in that moment with them can be so helpful and so supportive. And that's exactly what Ginny needed. And it helped her to kind of just get through that moment with, just with everything that was going on. So let me know what stressed y'all out. Let me know what stressed y'all out in the comments. Let's have more discussion. Let's process some more. I think I am through with episodes 5, 6, and 7. I don't need to rewatch those episodes, maybe later. But definitely, as you are making your way through this season, if you are new to watching the show, or if you plan to rewatch, just make sure you're taking care of yourself, you're doing your self-care. There's a lot of scenes that can be extremely triggering and can bring up maybe some of your own stuff, or maybe someone and is bringing up stuff for them, and maybe they want to talk to you about it, or yeah, just open up to you about it. So take care of yourself, take care of your mind, your body, your spirit. Do something that makes you feel calm and peace. Do something that brings you joy. All right. Thank y'all. See you next time.